We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. Dr. Jane Goodall. It's time for science, and it is time to talk again about science learning outdoors. Dr. April Holton and educator Elisa Slee join me to talk about outdoor professional learning and the value of getting both kids and teachers outside. Then Erica Beck Spencer joins me about the history and importance of taking FOSS outdoors, some great tips for teachers who might be nervous about doing so, weaving outdoor experiences directly into the FOSS curriculum, and the importance of helping kids connect to the natural world and away from screens. Well, it's time for science, and it is time to talk about one of our favorite subjects, taking science outdoors. With me today are Dr. April Holton and teacher Elisa Slee, who is a FOSS consultant and elementary teacher, and we are going to talk about the importance of taking kids outdoors to learn science and about this wonderful camp, a professional learning camp they do with the Los Angeles Unified School District about taking FOSS science outdoors. So thank you for being here, Elisa and Dr. Holton.
Thank you. So we just wanted to share a little bit about a great summer professional learning opportunity that we started in the LA Unified School District. And basically, in collaboration with the school district, we found that, post-COVID, we always are still talking about post-COVID, but post-COVID, we've found that students had, obviously been on screens a lot. And we know that, students today, even without COVID, are still spending 4 to 9 hours a day on screens. But during COVID, that was definitely a concern that students were on screens, as well as being told to kind of like stay in their safe indoors. And so from that, we had a collaboration with the LA Unified School District to think about, well, how can we support teachers with really trying to get students outdoors and really with the benefits of increased mental health, just getting fresh air, being able to make connections to the world around them that we know that's so important with science. And so we came up with an idea of having a LA Unified teacher science camp. That was a 2-day science camp. They didn't get to stay the night or anything, but we did have 2 full days pretty much of science camp where we came together and were able to do some amazing outdoor science activities that highlighted how to work with students in the outdoors, as well as that it isn't something extra when it comes to their FOSS curriculum.
So, Elisa, can you weigh in a little bit about these camps and your involvement?
Yeah, it was really an exciting experience because some of the teachers that attended had never been to a science camp themselves or a camp at all. And so we really set up several stations, group activities. We had music going and songs, and the teachers would rotate through the activities just as if they were scholars themselves. So we made nature journals. We made a field biologist kind of bag where they could collect their items. And we had several sessions from which the teachers could choose, like nature journaling, so you think you can't draw, how to manage an outdoor space. And so what we would do in these sessions is model what you could do with your kids. And we use the FOSS investigations. And sometimes these are investigations that teachers have skipped because they're a little bit nervous about taking their scholars outside. But in the camp situation, we run these investigations. So we're looking at bugs, we go on an insect hunt, we have the hand lenses out. And when the teachers are sitting outside and engaging in the nature journaling, they begin to see themselves as children a little bit and what they could do with their children.
I would think that that's sort of one of the big things we want to talk about is getting your average elementary school teacher maybe over that hump of being intimidated by science and taking all their kids outside. So what kind of tips do you have? What kind of things are you teaching these teachers? So Dr. Holton, what are some of the things that you would be trying to emphasize to get people over that sort of fear?
Yeah, the first is to experience it themselves, just like Elisa said. We want to have them experience and specifically within the FOSS curriculum. Within every FOSS module, there are times that students specifically have lessons that they go outside to do. And so we really like to focus on the fact that it isn't something extra that they're doing. They're still meeting their standards, but they're taking that outside and seeing the excitement of the students. So the number one thing is having teachers experience it themselves. And with that, as Elisa shared, showing them how to manage an outdoor classroom. So there are lots of tools for that. A lot of great work was done by Erica Beck Spencer at the Hall with the Taking FOSS Outdoors and modeling what we do, how we circle up students, how we walk out certain doors so that we send that message we're going outside to learn. The what materials we need to take outdoors with us to have a valuable experience of marking off the areas, and all of those management tools that teachers think about a lot in their classroom, but maybe don't necessarily think about them when they go outdoors. So that was a big key. Another big key that we like to focus on in this Taking Science Outdoors and Science Camp is that there's a lot of green initiatives that are going on, especially in California, in which if their schools are not part of those green initiatives, they think, oh, we have a lot of blacktop. And so one of our also our emphasis is, all of the valuable things that students can still engage in, they don't need an outdoor school garden. They don't need a large grass area. They don't need all of these things that, there are lots of things you can do with one tree and some dirt in a outdoor classroom.
Elisa, what can you add to that about helping teachers get over their fear of being outdoors with science kids?
Well, I think the big idea for me is connecting kids to the environment outside, but also to their families. So one of the things that helps teachers get over the humps is to tell them that with the Next Generation Science Centers, we want the phenomena that kids investigate to be ultra local. So a great way to get a teacher over the hump is just to walk around the school and say, hey, let's go and look for signs of erosion. And when you model that with kids, which we model at the camp with teachers, they suddenly see the runoff on a particular side of the school, the hill that is falling down, what their school looks like after a day of rain. And then the kids become citizen scientists. They observe that every single time rather than just an investigation. So in FOSS, we have soils, rocks, and landforms in fourth grade. We have pebble, sand, and silt in the second grade. And usually I say to teachers, like, have you, raise your hand if you've ever been in your class and you see some roly-polies or some pebbles in your scholars' pockets, and they all laugh, and they can all take a minute and share that with another teacher. And then I say, this is what we're capitalizing on when we take our kids outdoors. We're just building it in, and we're saying, hey, we're going to look at the pebbles now. And what I find is teachers get excited, and then kids do science every day, because then every single time a scholar goes outside, they're observing the natural world right at their school.
I'm literally right now working on the Observing Nature for Pre-K, which is basically looking at the clouds and finding trees and following. It's just, I love the idea of getting kids even that early interested in the whole concept of what's around them. So it's nice that FOSS, I think, that lays that groundwork right from the very beginning, all the way from pre-K. So I was wondering if either of you had some, just maybe a personal story about an aha moment maybe you witnessed with a kid or yourself, just sort of like, what's important to you about being outside, Dr. Holton.
Well, I think for me, and especially, I'm going to relate it back to COVID and when we were all locked indoors, right? We started still providing professional learning virtually. And we wanted to make sure that we were still providing these supports to teachers to continue to teach science, even though students were at home and on their computers. And so, I started going for a walk each day, just as many people did during COVID, right? And just as you're going through for a walk, I know started noticing things from at the time I was working with a lot of teachers on structures of life and thinking about all of the seeds as we engineer for seeds in structures of life. And I was walking around on the trails at my my community. And all of a sudden, I started gathering all of these different seeds that I would find on the ground. I'd find, the beginning of trees and comparing them and just really starting to notice that, wow, this isn't just in a book. This is something that is around me at all times. And, I live in the desert where people sometimes are saying, wow, there's not much diversity in that desert there. But really noticing that as you just the opportunity to pause and observe, sparking that curiosity. And even as an adult, starting collecting to compare. That's exactly what we want to see with kids as well. Um, I work with pre-service teachers as well, and I take them outdoors to do some of these exciting things that are very FOSS-like. And to have 21-year-olds sitting there on the grass looking at desert plants and all of a sudden realizing, wow, these two are different. But I always thought they were the same. That intense observation that leads to questions and that curiosity and investigation that is easy to spark when you take people outdoors and just start making those observations.
It's funny because I moved to Arizona when I was 11. I know you teach at Arizona State, where I'm an alma mater. I'm an alumni. But when I first moved there, it was the desert. It was, oh my God, this is horrible. And then over the years, I became so enamored of the desert and its diversity and all that kind of stuff, because it is. You have to look past the initial thing. And I love that that's happening, because it is. It's all around you in the desert. It's so wonderful. I love it. Elise, what about you? Any sort of stories or feelings of like an aha moment, or what, reaching kids or yourself or teachers?
Yeah, so I think as a child myself, one of the aha moments was when my ninth grade biology teacher offered the opportunity to meet up at a park and hike and collect water. And then that was when I decided I could be a scientist. I could see myself as a scientist because nobody in my family had gone to college. So when I think about working with teachers, I think about that. I went to the Yosemite Institute. They have a nature bridge program, and I did that with my chemistry class. That was my first time that far north in California. The quiet that I felt outside when we were nature journaling is something that I keep in my heart and I want to share with kids and teachers. So in our outdoor science camp, we really emphasize this, taking the time with your scholars to let them observe, like April's saying, and to write down and to draw. But I think for me, one wonderful aha was when we were suddenly in COVID and we had FOSS investigations we had just adopted. And I was scrambling as the science curriculum specialist to help teachers teach science from home. And FOSS put out this sheet of taking, April, what was the name of that sheet? It was your everyday outside, everyday challenge. And so I sent that home. We had teachers send it home, and families were sending us pictures. And that's, at the time we were using iNaturalist. Now I teach teachers about Google Lens when I take them outside, like at the science camp, and I say, your phone is your friend. So if you go outside, and a teacher might be reluctant and say, well, I don't know the names of the plants, I say, your phone is your friend. So you can take a picture and you can search on Google Lens. You can also take pictures of your scholars outside. When they see a plant, they go, Mrs. Slee, this is so cool. I go, let's take a picture. I don't know that plant. And then we can use technology to record what we notice and wonder about outside, and then continue those lessons inside, looking at data, using the photos as a way to record data, or using the photos so we can expand our knowledge and look at things that we didn't know about. So those were big aha moments using the homeschool connections. There's tons of homeschool connections in our modules that actually bring the families into the science conversation.
I was thinking one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is I love those moments where science teachers especially are able to say to kids, oh, I don't know that. Let's figure it out. Because I think that that's an important thing for kids to see. It's like, I don't know everything. What is this plant? And I think that's really, really awesome. The other thing I want to touch on, my kids were in middle school around COVID time and early high school. I mean, this is a whole generation where we may have kids who were like literally afraid to go outside because they had these formative years where they were told that it was, ooh, scary outside. How much have you seen that, and how can this help? How can this help get kids over that, Dr. Holton?
Yeah, and that is what sparked the science camp in LA was that idea that they were finding that students were managing a large, intense stress. They had been told that outdoors is scary, stay in your home. And so not seeing evidence of that now as much. Obviously, there's still a lot of stress left over from students, and the impact that has had on students as well as an impact it's had on social skills and all of those pieces that we know. But um, when we that was, like I said, was the main spark for science camp. Was okay, these kids are stressed out. They think they aren't supposed to go outside. Let's re-engage them. And the best way that we're going to do that is to get teachers on board. And so with that, of designing the science camp, we just easily just took sessions that each session was like an hour to an hour and 15 minutes of some things that they could learn that were directly from their curriculum, comparing the different leaves outdoors, any of those things, so that they could see, okay, I can do this with my students and I can get them outdoors, get over this stress and fear of being outdoors. And I think there's been a lot of progress in that now. But there are some gaps of that time that students didn't spend outdoors. And again, with the amount of screen time that we have with students today, and is difficult to overcome when outdoors is competing with TikTok,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I'd like to think I'm seeing a bit of a backlash. I see a lot of young people maybe coming to this realization themselves as they hit their 20s going, wait a second, I'm on my phone all the time. It's kind of nice. I see a little bit of that, which is nice. Elisa, how about you feeling in terms of like how important this is?
Oh, I was just going to say, I have some nephews and things that they have gotten rid of all their social media and things that they are like, I'm not going to be a slave to this. So there is somewhat in that generation of some of them that are deciding that for themselves. That is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's actually a little backlash, which is nice. So, Elise, how about you in terms of like how important it is overcoming that maybe a fear of children having to go outside? How do you feel that this camp is helping?
I think that sometimes we inadvertently we pass our fears on to children that we have. And so what I see when I'm training teachers is that teachers also had a little bit of a fear during this time, or teachers, were tied to our phones in terms of scrolling, checking messages, getting phone calls. So when we do this science camp, or when I do a session at a school on Taking FOSS Outdoors, I try to show that it's not just the life sciences that we do outside. So FOSS has a lot of investigations, like with the pinwheels or parachutes. And so recently I was at a school in LAUSD, and the teachers came in for a training, and they came in, they sat down, people opened their laptops, people got on their phones. And then when I introduced myself, I said, oh, we're going to be going outside. And that immediately got everybody engaged and curious. And then we made the pinwheels, and we went outside, and it was just so inspiring to see a bunch of teachers running with pinwheels, investigating them, trying them in different directions, and actually smiling because, they're outside, they're getting the endorphins, and the conversation is, oh, I can do these with my scholars. This isn't that difficult. And April and I, we were talking recently about how when you do science outside, it actually is sort of inspires you. It's almost contagious, right? Like, what else can I do outside? Everybody was so calm outside. Everybody was so engaged. Oh, let's go outside and write some poetry. Oh, I'm going to read from my big book outside. And so we see the crossover across the other content areas, and that's exciting.
So let's wrap it up with Dr. Holton. How can people, if they want to get involved in this, how do people find out about this? Is it still going on? What's the news with the camp?
Yeah, we try to do this every year. It always depends on scheduling, right? Unfortunately, last year when we were going to get set, we were all ready to go, and we were going to be doing it at UCLA, which had some issues at the time of different protests. So we weren't unfortunately able to do it last year, but it is something that teachers are asking for. So those that have participated previously, they have been asking, when are we going to have science camp? When are we going to have science camp? So we have been trying to make it an annual event with LA Unified School District. It's something that could easily be reproduced at any other, school district that has the FOSS curriculum, because it's using FOSS is what it is. And that's what the big thing is that, you're not needing to make time for something extra, which we know is always the challenge for teachers is it's like, I don't have time for anything more. But this is not doing anything extra. And so it is definitely something that is reproducible in any area of the country.
Well, this is great because I'm sure there are people who are listening who would love to do something like this in their own school districts, in their own states, and their own cities. So people can look in the show notes and contact Dr. Holton or Elisa, or for tips or tricks or anything like that, and also through FOSS as well, I'm sure. One of the things I love about FOSS as a curriculum is it's very, very hands-on. There's a lot of science curriculum that, keeps kids in the classroom. We were just talking about how important it is to get out of the classroom and that they're very technology-based and all that kind of thing, but they're not necessarily hands-on experiences. I was wondering if you could weigh in on that a little bit about the advantages of that, of hands-on, being outdoors, all that kind of thing, as opposed to just learning behind a screen. What do you feel about that, Dr. Holden?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Pre-COVID, we've found that a lot of school districts were looking for curriculum that got their students using computers. They considered it to be a great way that they were implementing STEM, that should put students on a computer. It was valued that if a curriculum focused more on technology tools, that it was considered a better thing. But something that came out of that time that was kind of amazing is that once we decided that, hey, you know what? Kids have enough time on computers and they know how to work with these tools that they were really excited to get students back into their FOSS that, has never been a program that's been centered around technology. It has always been, let's get students having common experiences in, hands-on activities and making sense of them, sometimes through technology, but it wasn't centered around technology. So it was all about making sense of those amazing hands-on common experiences. And so I think that is definitely one of the strengths and has been my love of FOSS for almost 20 years as I started as a classroom teacher using it. So,
Elisa, would you like to weigh in on that at all?
I completely agree with April. It's the shared sense making that I think will help us solve the problems of the world. And so that's the beauty of taking kids outside or investigating together like a group of scientists. A lot of people think that science is done by an individual, but in fact, the best science is always done with people together. And in this science camp, you really see the teachers understanding as individuals that it's the shared sense making and the active investigation that helps us remember what we learn in science. So it's a nice shift back to investigations and not just using technology. A simulation isn't the same.
Sometimes the old ways are best. So I'd like to thank both of you for being here and to commend you for this just amazing work. I'm sure teachers everywhere are benefiting from it.
Thank you.
It's time for science, and it is time to talk to one of our favorite educators, Erica Beck Spencer. Erica is a former curriculum specialist with the Full Option Science System, or FOSS, and spearheaded the Taking FOSS Outdoors initiative. She's instructed thousands of formal and non-formal teachers about teaching outside. So to say she's an expert on our topic today is the understatement of the year. So we're going to talk about the history of Taking FOSS Outdoors and the benefits of taking students and teachers out into the world. So Erica, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Tom.
Well, we just talked to a couple of wonderful people in Dr. April Holton and Elisa Slee about the Los Angeles Unified School District camp taking teachers outdoors and showing them the benefits of that. And they name-checked you without provocation because they talked about how wonderful you were and how instrumental you were to the whole thing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but I want to talk about the history of Taking FOSS Outdoors because it's such an integral part of the program and such a thing that a subject that I believe intimidates a lot of elementary school teachers what to do outside, how to control their class, what are we looking for, all of those kind of things. And FOSS really makes it an achievable and simple thing. And I think it's wonderful. What I'm really interested in is how this all started. How did you get involved? How did FOSS get involved? Did they contact you? What was the story? How did this whole Taking FOSS Outdoors start?
Well, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly where it started, but many, many years ago, before I was hired with FOSS or for FOSS, I was an educator in the Boston public school system. And when I was hired there, I was teaching preschool through fifth grade science, pushing a cart from room to room, FOSS materials falling off. I was hired to be a teacher leader in the city. And that was part of a systemic reform grant, part of an NSF major grant, multi-million dollar grant. And as part of that grant, I was trained to teach teachers how to use FOSS. That was amazing. But what came out of that is I was also handpicked by Kristen Metz from the Boston Schoolyard Initiative to help develop a course for teachers about teaching outside. I was selected to do that along with my colleague Dean Martin, and the three of us started teaching a workshop to teachers called Science in the Schoolyard. And we spent a lot of time figuring out what do teachers need to know about teaching outside and what are they going to do when they teach outside. And at the time we were using FOSS and another science program, and we helped teachers think about what they could do in the schoolyard. What were 10 to 15 minute extensions from what they were already doing? What were whole class activities that they could do after they did the indoor part of their curriculum? And what sometimes we did things, what could you do outside instead of inside? So we started teaching these workshops. And later on in that project, Kristen Metz hired me to create little guides that looked like FOSS to say, if you're teaching, say, this air and weather FOSS module, what are the things that you could do in the schoolyard? Not only what would you do in the schoolyard, but where within the FOSS module would you go to the schoolyard to do the activity? And she hired me to write them. And at one point, Marilyn Decker, the director of science education for the city of Boston, said, have you ever met Larry and Linda? You should tell them about this project. Larry and Linda were the directors of FOSS. And so Kristen Metz and I, Kristen was the director of education for the Boston Schoolyard Initiative. She and I met with Larry and Linda at an NSTA, a National Science Teacher Conference, and we sat down with them, and they were very excited to hear about this project, and they made sure that I knew that they both started their careers together working on a project called OBIS, Outdoor Biology Instructional Strategies. And so they were very aware and very educated in how to teach outside, and they loved the idea that we were taking FOSS to the schoolyard regularly. And that's how they got to know me, and eventually they recruited me to work for FOSS.
So you get hired by FOSS after all of your experience in Boston and all that. So how did the program come about? How did it develop? What were the next steps?
Well, after I was hired, I worked closely with the team to develop the outdoor activities. Sometimes they were modifications of OBIS activities that Larry and Linda had developed many years ago. I was trial testing all the activities in Portland Public Schools. So we developed things for the third edition, and that developed into the next gen edition and then the Pathways edition. So the Taking FOSS Outdoors chapter is an amazing resource if you are wondering how to support yourself with teaching outside, with managing students or materials. That resource is there for educators. And if perhaps there's an activity that you want to take outside and you're not exactly sure how to do it, perhaps it's not an outdoor activity and you want to take it outside, that chapter will help you do that. So I hope you can check out that chapter and go outside.
Well, I've always loved that aspect of FOSS, how it is so hands-on and definitely brings in the outside in so many different modules, which is awesome. But, what were your findings when you were trying to get K through 5 teachers outside? What were the sort of the things that came up that you were helping them overcome? What were some of the tips that you would give a teacher who says, I don't know what to do if I'm taking my kids outside? What are some of the basic 1, 2, 3s of how this works?
I love that you asked that question. So, and in many of the workshops that I taught teachers, I love to say, Boston inspired FOSS to go to the schoolyard, and here are some of the things we learned from Boston educators. So, one of my favorites is go out another door than the recess door. It's just a subtle reminder that we're going outside for science and not recess. We always gather in a circle when we're about to teach the lesson. And I've seen teachers cluster their students in a circle, but they're all in a group. They're not in a circle, shoulder to shoulder, where they can all see each other. They're just clustered together. So it's really important that you gather in a circle when you're beginning the activity. You review what's going to happen. Everybody can see everybody. You can see all of your students' eyes. And then you let the students go do what they need to do. After you've set the boundaries, you've reminded them what they need to do. And then you come back together in that sharing circle and you review what they've learned. It's really helpful if students are carrying a tool so that they have that subtle reminder that they're doing science. They're not just out there to have recess, they're out there to do science. Those are some of my favorite and most powerful ways to manage students that really affect their behavior.
When we were talking to Dr. Holton and Elisa Slee, they were talking about the camp they did in the Los Angeles Unified School District. They've done it for a few years. They didn't do it last year, but it's gone on for 2 or 3 years, I believe, after COVID, because they understood the need for, especially after COVID, getting kids back outside, not to be afraid of being outside, but also just to get them off of screens and things like that. So you were involved in that. I believe you were the keynote speaker, and so you were integral in that. What sort of advantage, what sort of a benefit is that sort of a camp? Because I think this is something that hopefully people who are listening may think about starting their own, or like, why don't we have a thing like this? Why would you have somebody do this? What were the benefits of this camp, especially for there in Los Angeles?
Well, their director of elementary science knew after, or actually it started during COVID and then extended beyond, knew that her teachers were exhausted and needed to entice her teachers to come to this science camp. She made it a FOSS science camp. In order to get them there, she wanted to make it fun. And so she decided to focus on FOSS Outdoors. And it was very engaging. She had, I don't know, I forget how many workshops we had. Almost all of them were done outside. There were things about beautiful workshops about nature journaling. There were, I took teachers outside and we did fun activities, different former Opus activities that we've turned into FOSS activities that were simulations of what wildlife do outside, population game.
Elise was talking about how inspiring it was. I asked for like an inspiring moment, and she talked about specifically teachers running around with pinwheels and practicing and learning and actually learning themselves and seeing how much fun it was. And I think that alone is probably worth it right there.
Right, because once they experience the joy of it and also how they experience the management techniques that I just talked about, they're like, oh, I could do that. And they see it, they do it, they feel it. They're like, oh, I can do that. And then once they've done it a few times, they build up those teaching chops and then they can do that on their own. But yeah, so Lillian from LA committed to doing this, and then it was so successful. She did it year after year, and it's amazing that such a large city has committed to teaching outside. And these in this day and age, getting kids in schools off screens and connected to the natural world outside through science class, which can sometimes cross different subject areas. Teachers are discovering that if kids are loving going outside during science, they're actually considering taking students outside in other subject areas, going outside for poetry or to read to them outside. Um, and the teachers are getting really excited about taking students outside. How wonderful is that?
I hear the term outdoors and you kind of think of where you live in Maine or Colorado, but the reality is that obviously you have to deal with this in your schoolyard. And it's great that LA, a big urban area, is talking about this, because we've talked about this many times, the idea of just go out on the blacktop of your school. If that's all you've got, there's things to do. There's dirt, there's trees, there's clouds. I'm working currently on the observing nature pre-K thing. So it's not even kindergarten. And we're already talking about, look at the trees, what's going on with the leaves. And there's always something. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing where a teacher may think, well, I don't live in a big outdoor area, but you do. You just have to go outdoors.
Well, and that's why it's so important to share with teachers that the Taking FOSS Outdoors initiative, which includes a chapter that we wrote to support teachers about how to teach outside, which includes all the outdoor activities that have been part of the third edition, the Next Gen edition, and now the Pathways edition, and other resources that are part of the FOSS program. And so all of these editions, the activities that we wrote could be taught in the worst of schoolyards. We thought very carefully about, do you need like a perfect schoolyard to teach these activities in? And the answer is no, you do not need a perfect schoolyard. And if you go outside to your schoolyard, even if you think it's a terrible one, like many of the schools that were in the Boston public schoolyards, they were often, when they first started, they were often just asphalt jungles. You know, we were able to do pretty incredible science when you looked at what was there. You just have to go outside with an open mind to see what you can find. Sometimes those weeds and the life that is in the cracks of those asphalt areas are pretty exciting.
Something I want to shift gears now, because something I love about what in your life is that you're a sailor. You're literally a professional sailor. You live in an area where there's a lot of ocean. Now, obviously, not everybody has an ocean. Not everybody has coastline, but you having, the ocean is such a part of your life. What are the kind of things that you would want teachers to teach their children about the ocean, even if they can't get to one? But let's say they are. Let's say you lived on a coastline. What kind of things would you do with your children? And then maybe for teachers who are more landlocked, what are the important concepts they should be learning about the ocean?
You
You
know, at
personally,
the
how do you feel about
elementary
that?
level, I think it's so important for students to first get to the ocean if they can. I, when I was teaching and trial testing the lessons at the very beginning of my tenure with FOSS, I was trial testing activities at a school that you could look out the windows and see the ocean. And there were kids in that school who had never been to the ocean, but they could see it from their classroom. And I took those same kids. I was in the classroom and I said, this was before I got hired by FOSS the year before. And I said to them that I saw a seal on the beach one day. And one of the students, she was a refugee from an African country, she said, Miss Beck, you saw a seal at the beach? And I said, yeah, the beach right down the road. And she couldn't believe it. And I said, have you been to that beach? She couldn't walk there. And she had never been there. So I planned an activity to take them. It was a poetry activity. And interesting, it didn't go very well, but there was a lesson there for me. And why it didn't go well, because they had never been to the beach before, and I expected them to sit and write their activity, do their little poetry writing, but they had never been to the ocean before. They needed to explore the ocean.
That's why classroom management parts are important.
That's right. And knowing knowing to expect that that's going to happen is a really important lesson. So as far as what I hope students will know about the ocean, learn about the ocean, first is just an appreciation for how amazing just it is. It's a beautiful place to be. And if teachers can bring their students to it and on a field trip perhaps and to pick up snails and hum and have the snail come out of the shell, if they can experience the joy of putting their feet in the water and looking in tide pools and seeing what lives there as the tide goes out, what's left behind, and to know the systems of what's on the seashore and what lives there and the ecology of it, I think that would be amazing. But at the elementary level, it's really about helping kids connect to the natural world. How can we help them fall in love with this natural place? How can we help them ask questions about what lives here? And, why does the seagull fly high above the parking lot and drop the shell on the asphalt? Why does it do that? And then we can go investigate. I think kids are so disconnected from the natural world. And if we can get them to go outside on a regular basis through the schoolyard, through field trips, and they can build their comfort level with, the comfort of their teacher, somebody they trust, then hopefully they can go outside, maybe on a summer camp adventure, and they can have a longer term adventure and they can build a longer term commitment to the natural world.
I think kids thrive outdoors, even if it's just outside in the playground. But I think it's, that's one of my favorite aspects of this. And as somebody who comes from an arts background, I would love to do art class outside or a poetry class or anything like that. I think because it's just, there's endless things to look at and to learn. And as I talked to Dr. Holton and Elise, was about the idea that it's also an opportunity for kids to see that the teacher doesn't know everything. It's like, oh, I don't know what that tree is. Let's find out what that tree is. That kind of a thing.
Yes.
It's so much more opportunity for that sort of thing to explore together.
Well, and I think that is one reason teachers are a little nervous about going outside sometimes, is they think they do have to know everything, but they don't have to know everything, and that's okay. I think that's a great thing to model for students. But you're also reminding me of when I was teaching in Boston, the most frequently asked question that kids would ask me is, Miss Beck, when are we going to go outside again? When can we go to the schoolyard?
I think that sums it up right there, doesn't it? If the kids are engaged, that's why we want them outside. That's awesome. Well, Erica, thank you so much for all your wisdom. I love talking to you, and I'm sure you're going to be back on the show because you're our resident expert in this, and it's always great to talk to you.
Thank you, Tom.
It's Time for Science is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lipman and Tom Racine, and is sponsored by School Specialty and FOSS, the full option science system, at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley. Be sure to check out FOSS on Facebook and Instagram.